It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. I also think of that, it's a deadwood issue. You know, one of the things you see with motifs like the phoenix. Remember when Harry Potter goes off to fight, he's like St. George, he goes off to fight the hell is that thing? The basilisk that turns you to stone when you look at it. It's a dragon for all intents and purposes. It's guarding a virgin. What's her name? It's not Virginia, it's close to that though. Ginevra, right, which is a variant of virgin and variant of Virginia. Well, when he gets bitten by the dragon and poisoned, that's the dragon of chaos, right? The thing that turns you to stone when you look at it. When he gets bitten by it, then he's going to die. And yeah, well, if you get bitten by the thing that turns you to stone when you look at it, if it bites you, man, if you're not dead, you're going to wish you are. It's one of the two. And then the phoenix flies in and cries tears into the wound, and that heals him. And the phoenix is the thing that allows the dead wood to burn off occasionally, let's say. Well, I think it's once every 100 years with a phoenix, and of course it's pretty dramatic. The whole damn bird has to go up in flames, and then there's nothing left but an egg. But there's a very serious message there too, which is that, you know, you can compare yourself in some sense to a forest fire, to a forest, you know, and a forest has to burn now and then for the dead wood to clear so that the forest can actually maintain its continued existence. And if you stop the forest from burning for a prolonged period of time, which happened in the United States when they were trying to manage the forest fires too tightly, then all that happens is the dead wood accumulates and accumulates and accumulates and accumulates and accumulates until the whole damn forest is dead wood, and then lightning hits it and it burns so hot that it burns the topsoil off. And then there's nothing left, nothing grows. And so that's a good moral lesson, which is don't wait too long to let the damn dead wood burn off, you know. Maybe a little self-immolation on a daily basis might be preferable to burning yourself all the way down to the bedrock, you know, once every 20 years or so, because maybe there won't be anything left of you when you do that. And, you know, that happens to people all the time. I've seen that happen to people many, many times. The dead wood accumulates, the mess around them gathers, the chaos that they haven't dealt with accumulates, and then one day the spark comes and they burn so far and so fast that there's not enough left of them to recover. And then they're the people who've been eaten by the beast. They're the people who've been eaten by the dragon and now are inside its belly, another very common archetypal motif. And well, maybe a hero will come along and rescue them, or maybe they'll just stay in there forever. And that's a precursor to the idea of hell. And it's not something I would recommend. So a little medicine on a regular basis is a lot better than total immolation on terms other than your own, sporadically. It's time to rid yourself of your current presuppositions. There's another thing that, see, in the Soviet Union, when Solzhenitsyn wrote about the Soviet Union and its pathologies, it sort of peaked in terms of its pathological authoritarianism when it became illegal to complain that your life wasn't going well. And you just think about how horrible that is, eh? Because you know, lots of times your life isn't going well. I mean, and I don't mean this in some casual way. I mean, maybe, I don't know, maybe you have diabetes and you know, maybe you're going to lose your feet or something. Like, it's really not, it's nothing trivial that's going on here. Something is not good. Or maybe it's economic, or maybe you're unemployed, but you see, the idea in the Soviet Union was, well, we already have all the answers. Everything's perfect already. That's what totalitarians think. Well, if everything's perfect and you're suffering, then, well, maybe there's something wrong with you. Because everything is perfect after all, and if you're suffering, then, and what are you going to come out and say? Well, I'm suffering? It's like, well, then you're evidence that things aren't perfect, right? You're like a widow or an orphan in an Old Testament story, you know, when the kings got too high and mighty, then they wouldn't pay enough attention to the widows and the orphans, and then the prophet would come along and say, you know, those widows and orphans, they're a lot more important than you think they are, and if you don't pay attention to them properly, then things are going to fall apart around you in a way that you just can't even imagine. And so, well, then you're sort of like your own widow and your own orphan, but you don't get to say, hey, look, you know, things aren't perfect yet because I'm actually having still quite a rough time here. You don't get to admit to your own suffering. If you can't admit to your own suffering, then you certainly, see, the suffering, especially the additional suffering, the excess suffering, should be treated as evidence that you're not doing something quite right yet. It should be treated as evidence that you're wrong. There's something important that you're doing that's wrong. I understand how harsh that is. And I'm not saying that everyone who's suffering is suffering because they're doing something in some simple way that's wrong. I was in an elevator once in a hospital. It was a very terrifying thing. And this person got on who was just in an absolute state of shock. I mean, it was really not good. And I don't remember how this happened, but I engaged the person in conversation, and they just said that they had just been diagnosed with what looked to be terminal cancer. And what was horrifying about it was that what they were doing was going over their life in the elevator, trying to figure out what they had done in order to deserve such a fate. They had immediately taken it on themselves as a moral failing. And that's not what I'm saying. You can't come up to someone who has cancer and say, well, if you weren't such a bloody idiot throughout your whole life, you wouldn't have cancer. And believe me, that happens a lot more than you think. And people who have diseases like that get blamed for it. That's not what I'm saying. It's not like that. It's a more generalized attitude. That is that if life isn't yet what it should be, then you have a primary responsibility to do something about it. And the place to start looking is to your own errors and to fix them. And that's a safe bet, man, because you're probably doing some things that you wouldn't have to be doing that if you fixed would make things better. So it's time to let go and to sacrifice who you are for who you could become.